Hi, this is TJR, and what you're about to watch is a rebroadcast of my in-depth analysis of the album Led Zeppelin 4. This video was originally broadcast on the other channel where I do music reviews called Music Worth Buying. On that channel, myself and music writer for the Orange County Register, Robert Kinsler, review albums every week. And if you want to check out that channel, please go to youtube.com/musicworthbuying2. And I'll include a link as well. And hope you enjoy this in-depth analysis of Led Zeppelin 4. Led Zeppelin 4 is the default name given by most fans and the media for the band's untitled fourth studio album, which was released on November 8th, 1971 on Atlantic Records. The decision to not title the album has been credited to Jimmy Page as a response to the negative and lukewarm reviews the band had been receiving from the music press up to that time. The idea was that the press would be less likely to pigeonhole the band if they appeared to be a bit more anonymous. Not only did the album have no official title, but the band's name appears nowhere on the cover. There are also no pictures of the band members anywhere on the album's packaging. It's reported that the record label was not happy with this idea, and it's not hard to see why. For better or worse, a band or musical solo artist is a brand, and you want consumers to find their release. It's even more amazing to realize that Atlantic Records actually let them do this. In 2010, Jimmy Page stated in an interview to the Times newspaper that the band just had a lot of faith in what they were doing. Obviously, Atlantic Records also had a lot of faith in the band. I can't imagine any record label allowing something this risky in the current world of short attention span, instant gratification media that we live in now. It's difficult to see this now when you think about Led Zeppelin 4 because it's arguably the most popular album by the band and is considered to be one of the greatest albums of the classic rock period. It has spawned some of their largest radio airplay hits ever, and the cover image of a painting of an old man bent over carrying dry wood on his back is now considered an iconic album cover. But take a good look at the cover and try to imagine back in 1971 finding this record on the new release shelf. I'm sure that any smart record store owner or staff would have put up some kind of signage to inform customers that this is the new release by Led Zeppelin. But to look at this cover without the benefit of hindsight, there would be nothing to indicate what kind of music this is. This strategy could have just as easily backfired on them. Thankfully for them, it didn't. The album was produced by guitarist Jimmy Page and recorded over a period of 4 months. More and more, Jimmy Page is overdubbing and orchestrating guitars in ways that would be impossible to play live without bringing a few more guitarists on tour, and the band would always have to find new ways to arrange the songs to fit just the 4 of them. Now, as with my previous analysis of Led Zeppelin 1, it will be impossible to not discuss the charges of plagiarism as part of this review. But unlike my previous review of Led Zeppelin 1, there are a lot less of them to discuss. Track 1, Black Dog. I'm always going to wonder about the guitar FX sound loop that plays right before Robert Plant's vocals. It's clearly been created with the guitar, but it has always sounded like a guitar impression of a rough engine start. It also sounds like a dog panting. If that was the intention, perhaps it's meant to tie into the album's lyrical themes of an old dog that, despite his age, is still very sexually active. And the guitar impersonation of an engine starting is symbolic of the old dog getting his motor started in the morning. And while the song's initial lyrical inspiration was literally from a real dog that was hanging around during the recording sessions, the lyrics only use this as a metaphor. The song is built around a traditional call and answer motif. Plant's a cappella vocal is the call-out, and the song's main riff played around an E chord and ending in an A is the response. Bassist John Paul Jones is credited with coming up with the main riff of the song. The intention was to write a song with complex rhythm changes that people could not dance to or groove to. This is astounding to think about today, that a popular band would want to challenge their audience and themselves rather than give them what they expect. Another reason for the utter uniqueness of Black Dog is John Bonham's drumming. I have no trouble wrapping my brain around Black Dog when I listen to it as a whole, but when I try to dissect it, by mentally separating the guitar and the bass, which follow each other, from the drums, I start to have a hard time. Every piece of sheet music that I look at for Black Dog shows the song's time signature is in 4/4 time. But sometimes I suspect that Bonham is playing in a different time signature from Page and Jones, and that somehow it all mathematically works out. I have read online debates with drummers on this, but nothing conclusive. I also know of more than just a few people who claim to hate Black Dog because it has been so overplayed on rock radio. This is one reason why I am glad that I stopped listening to terrestrial radio years ago. Overplayed classic rock songs like Black Dog can breed familiarity and the contempt that goes with it. And even if you are a musician, you can lose sight of what a unique piece of rock music this is. Black Dog is a song based on blues musical tropes, but it is unlike any blues song ever written before it. So different that you either classify it as something completely new or as blues music completely redefined. At the end of the day, Black Dog is musically complex. It combines numerous musical styles in very unpredictable ways. It is challenging for other musicians to play, and its musical complexity is juxtaposed with Robert Plant's bold lyrics of the more animal nature of sex. Not since Whole Lotta Love has another Zeppelin song captured this raw sexual emotion. You probably can't dance to Black Dog in the way that we traditionally think of when one dances to a popular song. But as far as I'm concerned, you can certainly groove to it. Track 2, Rock and Roll. If I had to name a least favorite song on this album, it would be Rock and Roll. But that is not saying that I don't like it, because it's a good song. It's just my least favorite on an album of stellar tracks. Rock and Roll is based on the standard 12-bar blues progression. I look at this song as the band's ode to the rock heroes of their youth. And that is reflected in Plant's lyrics as he makes references to other early rock hits like The Stroll, The Book of Love, and Walking in the Moonlight. If I have one criticism for the track itself, it's how the guitar solo sometimes becomes murky and indistinct sounding at certain points during the song. In spite of this, though, it never loses its emotion. The opening drum riff is based on the drum intro to Keep a Knockin' by Little Richard. And if you listen to that song, you can hear the similarities, but you can also hear the distinct differences too, as John Bonham has added a lot of his own touches to it. Now, the opening for Rock and Roll comes in on the and 3 count rather than on the downbeat of 1, which would be the more obvious thing to do. This has caused confusion with bands trying to cover this song for years. In fact, many less experienced cover bands will just simply dumb down the intro. This song is a good illustration of how Led Zeppelin would do really interesting and challenging things, even with a fairly straightforward rocker like this. Making a guest appearance on the piano is Rolling Stones pianist Ian Stewart, whose performance adds a very strong Jerry Lee Lewis flavor to the song. But I do have to wonder, why didn't they just use John Paul Jones? Track 3, The Battle of Evermore. Now, references to author J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings had appeared in Zeppelin songs prior to Battle of Evermore, but given its medieval sound and its lyrical themes, Battle of Evermore probably makes the best use of them. Before the release of director Peter Jackson's popular film adaptations, a lot of these references to Lord of the Rings were lost on most Zeppelin fans. Having read the books in high school, I got the references right away, and always felt a bit like I was part of a secret club for it. The story goes that Jimmy Page had never played a mandolin before, but started noodling on one during the sessions, and came up with the song's main riff pretty much on the spot. Acoustic music has always been an important part of Zeppelin's sound, but nothing this medieval sounding had been attempted by the band before. Utilizing outside singer Sandy Denny from the band Fairpoint Convention, this is the only time that I can think of where Led Zeppelin used an outside vocalist. The two of them sing the song as a duet, with Plant serving the role of narrator and Denny serving the role of the town crier. Throughout this album, I feel that Jimmy Page really excels as a producer. Aside from the voices, there is only acoustic guitar and mandolin, and yet it feels so rich and full. There is also at times a unique and beautiful melodic dissonance created between the two voices on this recording that I have not heard before or since. Battle of Evermore really doesn't feel like it's coming from any rock album of the time. Instead, the song feels as if it's being somehow beamed to us from a forgotten mythical time period. This brings us to track 4, Stairway to Heaven, arguably the most famous song in Led Zeppelin's catalog, and probably one of the most airplayed songs in the world, if not one of the most popular songs in the world. It's also, as of this writing, currently embroiled in a plagiarism lawsuit. Let's discuss the claims of plagiarism first, and then discuss the song. Now, if you haven't done this yet, pause this review and listen to the instrumental song by Taurus by the band Spirit. Please listen to the entire song and not just the opening guitar line. Then, you might also, when you get a chance, follow the link here that I've put here on YouTube, where you can see me on my own YouTube channel performing a comparison on guitar between the two songs' guitar openings, and then discussing the similarities and differences. Now, the introductory guitar line from both songs resemble each other very closely. Taurus by Spirit was recorded and released 2 years prior to the release of Stairway to Heaven. On first listen, I could almost make the argument that these similarities are just a coincidence. Musical coincidences do happen after all, where songs sound similar to each other, and yet it was all completely unintentional. And I can point out quite a few of them. And after all, it is only the introductory guitar line that sounds similar. But prior to writing and recording Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin toured with Spirit, who played Taurus live at their shows. So the argument of coincidence falls apart. It seems almost impossible that Jimmy Page could not have heard Taurus. Are the two opening guitar lines note for note identical? Not completely, as the companion video that I will link to will demonstrate. But they are fairly close to each other in composition, and I also should add in tone. Once the guitar on Taurus does come in, the composition takes on a very Renaissance-like music tone to it. Spirit uses a harpsichord, and Stairway uses the recorder flute, but they both achieve this very Renaissance music sound. Now, does this mean that Stairway to Heaven is a complete ripoff? No. The first most obvious difference is that Taurus is an instrumental number, and Stairway to Heaven is a song with vocals. Taurus starts completely differently with an orchestral opening that combines both classical and jazz before its opening guitar line comes in. It is this opening guitar line that Stairway to Heaven's opening guitar line comes very close to. But after this, Stairway to Heaven and Taurus are two completely different pieces of music. Saying that Jimmy Page completely swiped Stairway to Heaven from Taurus is a bit of an exaggeration. Saying that he swiped the first 4 measures of Stairway to Heaven is not. Now, I have to ask the question, is it possible that Jimmy Page unintentionally copied the intro to Taurus? I want to believe this is possible, but I do harbor doubts. Page claims that the opening riff, along with a lot of the other musical elements to the song, came to him over long periods of time while he was recording at the Bronyar Cottage, and hopefully I've pronounced the name of that right. Now, just because Led Zeppelin did tour with Spirit doesn't mean that Jimmy Page hung on every note that the band played. He might have only ever heard Taurus reverberating through the music halls while in the dressing room doing other things. But his subconscious latched onto it, and his subconscious spit it out while he was working on composing new material for the band to record. Like I said, I'd like to believe this is true, but Led Zeppelin has had quite a number of plagiarism accusations made against them. Some of them, like Communication Breakdown, are, in my opinion, invalid and nothing more than exaggeration and hyperbole. But some of them, like Dazed and Confused, are completely valid and tarnish the band's legacy. Even with the invalid claims aside, having as many valid accusations of plagiarism that Zeppelin does have against them doesn't help your case, and it makes it harder for me to even give them that much of a benefit of the doubt. But for the sake of argument, let's assume it was unintentional. If this was the case, would this mean that he is not guilty of plagiarism? No. It would only mean that he copied it unintentionally. But that doesn't mean there is no legitimate case for plagiarism. Plenty of music artists have unintentionally or subconsciously copied the works of others without realizing it. Back in 1997, the Rolling Stones were about to release their Bridges to Babylon album, when Mick Jagger and Keith Richards suddenly realized that the song, Anybody Seen My Baby, sounded unintentionally like Constant Craving, a recent hit by Katie Lang. The Stones quickly contacted Katie Lang and explained the situation. They apologized and agreed to add her and her songwriting partner Ben Mink to the songwriting credits, and agreed to pay her a share of royalties for the song. I don't believe that the Stones would ever intentionally rip off someone else's song, since they really don't need to. In this case, the album was already going to press when they made this discovery. But I'm willing to bet that if they had realized the similarities between their song and Katie Lang's song, while still in, say, the writing or recording phases, they would have probably just scrapped the song and said, let's write something else. So it is possible that Page might have only subconsciously copied it. But even if he had, and then wasn't aware of it until many years later, he still has to do the morally right thing, which is own up to it and make reparations, amend the songwriting credits, and pay a share of royalties to Randy California, who wrote the song Taurus. Now, let's assume that Jimmy Page knowingly swiped the opening guitar line from Taurus. What was he thinking? Probably the same thing that he thought when he knowingly ripped off Dazed and Confused by Jake Holmes. Whenever people steal anything, be it shoplifting in a store or illegally downloading music and movies, there is always a rationalization that makes what they did okay in their mind. It disappoints me to think about this because Jimmy Page has proved time and again that he can create amazing original music on his own. And like the example I gave earlier with the Rolling Stones, he's creative enough that he doesn't need to plagiarize anyone. And if this was intentional, sadly, he didn't let that stop him from doing it anyways. Does this mean that Stairway to Heaven is now a song stripped of all its validity? Absolutely not. Stairway to Heaven is one of the most brilliant songs ever to be written and recorded during the rock era. The song's opening guitar line, while lifted, features a secondary ascending melody that the Spirit version does not have. It further departs from its alleged source material after the first run-through, with the entrance of a new melody played on the recorder flute that gives it that very Renaissance music feel, and makes it musically a seamless transition from the album's previous track, The Battle of Evermore. Right from the beginning, Jimmy Page was always talking about Zeppelin's music being about light and shade. To me, Battle of Evermore is the darkness of war, and Stairway to Heaven is the light of hope. Battle of Evermore is the medieval, and Stairway to Heaven is the Renaissance. In interviews, Robert Plant has stated that the lyrics for Stairway just flowed out of him upon hearing the music. He also stated that the opening line of "There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold," and up to the line, "with a word she can get what she came for," was originally written as a kind of condemnation of a person who thinks that they should get whatever they want, whenever they want, without ever giving back. But I think it would be a misnomer to say that this is all that the song's lyrics are about. As the lyrics progress from, "And it's whispered that soon, if we all call the tune, then the piper will lead us to reason," it becomes clear that what originally started out as a negative message is becoming more positive, and that the worst of us, or I should say even the worst of us, can change. This is further reinforced by the lines, "Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on." I could probably do a line-for-line analysis of just the lyrics alone, but at the end of the day, it's just my interpretation. What Stairway to Heaven means to each person depends on where they are in their life as they listen to it. Plant's lyrics are amazingly poetic in this song, and were influenced by what he was reading at the time, which included the writings of British antiquarian Lewis Spence. I would also guess that there might be some influences of Tolkien as well. Now, getting back to the music, the song is broken up into 3 different sections. The first is based on different variations of the song's opening guitar line of an A minor chord with a descending bass line, with an additional guitar part that starts on C and then concludes on D, to keep this section from ever sounding repetitive. The second section I will refer to as the "Ooh, It Makes Me Wonder" section. This centers around an A minor 7th chord. Now, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but to me, a lot of Jimmy Page's guitar playing sounds like things that I find in nature. This section of the song has always sounded like strong ocean waves lapping against each other, and that imagery has always gone through my mind for me for as long as I've ever heard it. I should mention John Paul Jones's bass line at this point, because this is where it kicks into gear. I think most bass players would have just followed along with the chord changes, but John Paul Jones executes his own eloquent musical dance in and around Page's guitar line. He manages to put his own signature on the song, but never stomps on the guitar or vocal lines. His contribution to this song is very underestimated. Really, you should re-listen to this song and just pay attention to Jones's bass at this point. This section is then broken up by an arpeggiated variation of the walk that begins with C and resolves on D. When John Bonham's drums kick in, it tears down any sense of revere that the song had previously and replaces it with a bold sense of confidence. This leads into a brief, triumphant musical bridge centered around the D major chord that almost feels as though the song has changed keys before it transforms into the final, third, and much heavier hard rock section, which returns to a variation of the A minor theme that opened the song, but this time, instead of just the bass line descending, it is the entire chord with the half steps removed. Play this same part on an acoustic guitar, and it takes on a Spanish classical feel, not unlike Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. This last section begins with one of Jimmy Page's best guitar solos ever, and even has its own mini answer callback section at the end. Every note counts and says something. It is one of his best. The solo reaches its climax and Plant takes over and brings the song to the end of its journey with the lines, "And as we wind on down the road, our shadows taller than our souls." After Robert Plant concludes the lyrics, Page gives us one more solo, and the band ends on the tension-filled dissonance of an F major 7th chord. Plant closes with an a cappella re-singing of the song's title, and then nothing. One of the many brilliant things about the composition of Stairway to Heaven is how it never resolves on the A minor chord like you would expect it to. It just hangs there in dissonance. And back in the days of vinyl, this song would have ended side 1, and you would have sat there in silent dissonance waiting, seemingly forever, for that final chord to ring out. But of course it never does. Constant radio airplay has bred contempt for this song, but I say it's brilliant. It's brilliant in its composition, and it's still seductive even after all these years. With Stairway to Heaven being such a hard act to follow, Side 2 does a complete about-face with track 5, Misty Mountain Hop. The song's title is another reference to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but don't look for too much more Tolkien mythology beyond the title, as the rest of the lyrics deal with a legalized pot rally that took place in Hyde Park, where the police were made numerous arrests, and this was in London, I should add. The song is another example of John Paul Jones's underrated keyboard skills. His playing supplies the funk backbone that the song rests on, while Bonham's drums push just slightly ahead of the beat to give the song its lion-like roar. The layering and harmonization of Plant's vocals, Page's guitar, and Jones's keyboard also makes this the most Beatles-like song that Zeppelin has ever recorded. Mostly, though, Misty Mountain Hop brings us back to the fun spirit of track 2, Rock and Roll. But whereas Rock and Roll is a throwback to the music of rock's pioneers, Misty Mountain Hop is firmly entrenched in the funk that was contemporary at the time. Track 6, For Styx. The song's title is nowhere to be heard in the chorus or anywhere else in the lyrics, because the title comes from the fact that John Bonham played the song holding onto 2 drumsticks in each hand for the recording. Like Black Dog, For Styx is another melding of heavy metal and Eastern Indian music. But on For Styx, the Eastern influence is much more pronounced. Now, most rock and pop songs are played in 4/4 time, but once in a while, you get one played in 6/8 time or 3/4 time. Throughout, For Styx switches between 5/8 and 6/8 time, which is part of why the song stands out so much. Page and Jones play an aggressive metal riff over the verses that is very addictive to the ears. Plant's lyrics sound like they are about someone trying to get out of a bad relationship during this heavier section, but become more mystic during the song's second section, where the music becomes more Eastern sounding and features John Paul Jones on synthesizer. This second section of the song is another great example of the musical tension that Led Zeppelin could create. Page's guitar and Jones's keyboard sound expansive and ambient, but Bonham's drums maintain a contrasting heavy intensity. It's a fragile balance of both the aggressive and the serene. and once again exemplifies Page's musical interest in light and shade. For Styx remains for me one of the most underrated songs on this album and in Zeppelin's catalog. Track 7, Going to California. This is one of my personal all-time favorite Zeppelin songs, and I've covered it myself at solo acoustic gigs. The song features Jimmy Page on acoustic guitar holding down the main rhythm, while John Paul Jones provides textures both weaving in and around, and in some cases doubling on Plant's vocal melody on mandolin, creating a mix of both contemporary folk and Celtic music, making it a musical bridge to the distant past and the modern. The interplay between Page and Jones on this track is, to put it mildly, exquisite. If you listen to the recently released Deluxe 2 CD edition of the album, you can better hear it for yourself, as it features a guitar and mandolin mix that drops out Plant's vocals. Reportedly, the song is inspired by Joni Mitchell, whom both Page and Plant were infatuated by, and the line, "To find a queen without a king, they say she plays guitar, cries and sings," is a reference to the Mitchell song, "I Had a King." Even if it isn't, it doesn't really matter. The line, like every line in this song, is so universal that anyone can relate to it and relate their own experience of yearning for a love that they have not yet found. Plant's lyrics weave back and forth between modern references like "Smoked My Stuff" and "On a Big Jet Plane" to more lyrically timeless and abstract references like "Ride a White Mare in the Footsteps of Dawn." Like Stairway to Heaven, it's lyrically beautiful, and it makes me aware of just how little credit Robert Plant gets for the grace and beauty of his lyrics. Even after all these years, Going to California still instills a sense of yearning and longing that few songs have ever done for me before or since. Track 8, When the Levee Breaks. This was originally written and recorded by Kansas Joe McCoy and Memphis Minnie back in 1929. This song was in response to the upheaval caused by the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927. Many blues artists have recorded versions of this song. While there are no plagiarism claims to this track, and there can't be because the song is in the public domain, it is interesting to note that the credits on Led Zeppelin's version only credit Memphis Minnie for her lyrics, and not Kansas Joe McCoy. It does, however, credit the rest of the band. Zeppelin's version is musically a complete reworking of the original, so I'm guessing the band felt they had earned the right to put their names on it. Or perhaps they came up with the music for this track first and decided, hey, let's just do When the Levee Breaks to it. I have no qualms with the band adding their own names to this version, but I don't think they should have removed Kansas Joe McCoy. Without the original version of this song, their version could not exist. But let's get back to the music, which is stellar. It stays true to its blues origins, but it achieves an almost cosmic trance-like quality that I don't think has been duplicated until composer Angelo Badalamenti composed and recorded The Pink Room for the movie Fire Walk With Me. I don't know what Mr. Badalamenti's musical upbringing was about, but I would not be surprised to find out that Zeppelin's version of When the Levee Breaks was an influence on The Pink Room. Its heavy drum sound was created by placing the drum kit at the bottom of the stairwell and 2 recording mics at the top. The track was also originally recorded at a faster tempo and then slowed down, which only adds to its dark, murky, swamp-like quality. Also added to the mix are huge amounts of echo to the drums and backwards phasing to Robert Plant's harmonica. The song feels like a musical hurricane swirling around you with growing intensity, as it's broadcasted to you from a blues club from some other unearthly dimension, until the end, when, like an old truck on its last legs, it comes lurching to a stop before it musically scatters into the wind. When the Levee Breaks is a masterwork of improvised studio production to create a recording that couldn't be created anywhere else. Throughout Led Zeppelin IV, Jimmy Page's tremendous skills as a producer are on display. This, combined with the band's unique inventiveness in their arrangements, are also key in creating both songs and recordings that very few have managed to parallel. Over the decades, the album has been praised and decried. Its cornerstone track, Stairway to Heaven, has been called almost perfect by classical musicians, and overplayed and pompous by critics who are too cool for the room. While working on this review, a younger musician got into a conversation with me about how he felt so much of today's music not being as original sounding as it was during Zeppelin's era. I assured him that there was lots of unoriginal music being made then too, but that we've forgotten about it, and that the same will happen to today's unoriginal music as well. But I added one thing that is different today from yesterday, is that much of today's radio music is made by producers at computers rather than by musicians on their instruments. Like all the great music from this era, Led Zeppelin's albums show just how much innovative and even unintentionally innovative music can be when it's made by musicians, and that the fact that the album's producer was also a brilliant musician doesn't hurt either. For Music Worth Buying, this is TJR. Please be sure to tell us what you think of this album by leaving a comment below. Also, don't forget to check out the very brief companion video of myself on guitar explaining the musical differences between Stairway to Heaven and Taurus. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe.